Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the October My Creative Scrapbook Limited Edition kit. In the October kit, there were pattern papers from a number of different manufacturers. The paper that immediately caught my eye was a Simple Stories floral paper, and I immediately knew I was going to be fussy cutting out the flowers that were on that paper. So what you see on my mat is the result of me fussy cutting out every last flower that was on that paper. I absolutely loved it, along with some of the embellishments from the ephemera pack and the laser cuts that were in the October kit. I had this idea that I would try something different. I usually use Distress ink and Vintage Photo to ink all of the elements that are going on my scrapbook pages, but I wanted to try using Victorian Velvet, Distress Oxide, and Weathered Wood. There were a lot of pinks and grays, and I thought that that would look pretty, but once I had inked everything with those two inks, I felt that the colors blended in too much to the ephemera, and they didn't really make the edges look darker, and I really like that effect because it helps the elements to stand out against the background. So I went back and I re-inked everything with the Vintage Photo, and although I didn't try something new, it kind of confirmed for me why I use the Vintage Photo so frequently. I use two different pattern papers to create my background. I loved both sides of the pattern paper that I'm putting adhesive on now, but I decided to use the plainer side because I knew I was going to be putting so many florals on top of it. I didn't want to have a floral on top of a floral. I thought that might be a little too much. On the left-hand side, I'm using a strip of Prima pattern paper that was in the kit. I love the gold foiling, and I thought that since it was just a small amount of a busier pattern paper, it wouldn't be too much for the layout. For this layout, I'm using a 4x6-inch photo of both of my daughters, my favorite subject for my scrapbooking pages. I'm mounting it on some white cardstock. I always like to have a white border around the edge of my photos when possible. And then I'm going to be using these three layering pieces that came in the kit to layer behind the photo. I'm using my Tim Holtz distressing tool to roughen up the edges of all of the cards. And then I once again use my favorite distress ink in Vintage Photo to ink all of the edges. I'm not going to do a lot of distressing on this layout. I want the layout to look fairly clean, but I thought that it would add a little bit of character to the layout to have a little bit of distressing. So I mounted the photo on the green card. It was just the right size, just kind of got lucky on that. And now I'm going to layer the pink and the blue cards behind the photo. I'm only going to be using a little bit of each of the cards, only a small bit is showing, so I decided to cut off part of the cards in an L shape so that I could layer them behind the photo, just in case I need a little bit of blue or pink on this layout or another layout. I have a little bit left. After I had layered those cards behind the photo, I distressed the edges a little bit more and inked the edges a little bit more too. And then to add to the distressing, I folded the edges up a little bit, up and down actually, and I like the way this adds to the distressing. I wanted to be very careful about where I place the photo on the layout. I am placing the line, the imaginary line between my two daughters along the edge of that piece of paper that I have on the left. The strip of pattern paper measures 4 inches by 12 inches, and 4 inches marks 1/3 of the layout. And it seems that the eye is drawn to things that are placed along those lines that are 1/3 of the way in or 1/3 of the way down or up. And it doesn't have to be an actual line as it is on my layout. It just kind of exists without there being any actual real line. And I do find that when I keep that in mind, the photo tends to be a little bit more prominent and the layout seems to look a little bit more balanced. I hope what I'm saying makes sense. I had learned about this rule of thirds a while back when I took a composition class many years ago. And then I heard a scrapbooker mention it not too long ago. I'm so sorry, I can't think of who it was, but it reminded me how that's another thing that can be kept in mind. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to use that rule or that layouts that don't take that into consideration don't come out good, but it's just something that I think is important to just consider or know about. And I don't know if I've explained that correctly, but if you want to know more about it, just Google the rule of thirds. I used a rather big doily on my page. I haven't used a doily in a while, and I thought that this size doily went really well with the size photo that I have. And I'm arranging all of those beautiful flowers in a couple of clusters all around the photo. I have some large clusters that are right near the photo, and then a somewhat smaller cluster in the upper right-hand corner, and then I'm also going to make a small cluster in the lower left-hand corner. There isn't a lot of dimension on this page, but I did add some fun foam to the backs of some of the flowers, especially this flower that is going to be resting on top of the photo. That way it will sit flat when I place it on top of the photo. The flowers that are in the opposite corner, those are tucked behind the photo, so I didn't need to use foam on those flowers. One of the things I really loved about using all of these fussy cut flowers was that on the same piece of pattern paper, there were flowers that were lots of different sizes. And I love using flowers of different sizes to make clusters. I just think that it makes a cluster look much more natural than if the flowers are all the same size. If you're interested in seeing all of the papers that are available in the October kit, you'll be able to see that in the unboxing video that I'm going to finish this week. And when I do, I will put the link to the unboxing video in the description box. I wanted to add a little bit of dimension to the cluster in the upper right-hand corner, so I added some foam to the back of the large pink flower, and then I attached everything else down with some ATG adhesive, and now I'm attaching that cluster, the huge photo cluster, down using some adhesive as well. I used one of the branding strips and I cut out these words that say "Happy Together Today." And I thought those were just the right size to use to the right-hand side of the photo. Those are not my title though. I'm going to use the title "Hello," which I am popping up on some foam and placing on top of the photo. Then I do the same thing to the smaller sentiments. I use some thin strips of foam and I pop those up as well. And I think just that little tiny bit of dimension makes the page look a little bit more interesting. And then after I popped all of them up on some foam, I use some adhesive and attach those down to the layout. I wanted to make sure that they were staggered, that all of them started and ended at a different place. I also think that adds a little bit of interest to the page. Now I'm adding one of my absolutely favorite embellishments to the layout, which is butterflies. Because there is a lot going on this layout, a lot of different shapes and different colors, I was thinking that using butterflies that were all the same color would keep the layout from looking too confusing to the eye. I love adding butterflies to my layouts. I add them to many of my layouts, and I very frequently use foam to pop up their wings. If there's something on the page that I think should get dimension, I think that it should be the butterflies. And then I put some adhesive on the center too and press down the center, and that makes the wings pop up a little bit more than the center of the butterfly. And I just love that effect, so I use it quite a bit. For the butterfly that's facing to the right that I put near the sentiments, I just put some foam on the back of it just to pop the whole thing up. I didn't want that to be the only butterfly that didn't have some dimension. In addition to having lots of different sizes of flowers on this piece of pattern paper I fussy cut everything from, there were these little branches. They look like they have buds on them, and they were a really pretty color of pink. So I fussy cut all of those out, and now I am tucking them into a number of different places in the clusters. The clusters are pretty full, but I tucked a couple of leaves to the left of the photo. There was a little open spot there, and then I added a very small branch to that small cluster on the bottom left, and I also put a tiny branch to the right of the sentiment that says "Today." However, I don't leave that there. And then there were a whole bunch of laser cuts that had, I guess they're berries on them in different colors. There were pink ones and blue ones and white ones. For this layout, I'm adding the blue ones, and I thought that since it was so much pink on the page, the blue ones would stand out the most. And there might be a lot of floral overload on this page, but I think that it kind of works because there's really not a lot else on the page. And as I said earlier, the background paper is rather plain, so hopefully you think it works too. Well, one of my favorite things to add to my layouts is photo corners, especially on a big photo like this. I feel it looks a little unfinished at this point if I don't put some photo corners on my layouts. So I used this piece of packaging and my EK Success scalloped photo corner punch, which is one of my favorite punches. I use it quite a bit. I punched out some photo corners. I inked the edges with the Distress ink in Vintage Photo once again, and then I attached them down to the layout. I didn't like the way the branch on the left-hand side looked. I just tucked that in there, but then I decided that I was going to cut the leaves apart so that I could angle them a little bit differently than when they were attached. Another thing I love to do to butterflies is put some pearls down the center. These are strips of self-adhesive pearls. They're nice and tiny. I get these from the Eyelet Outlet and I love using them. I also love using pearls on lots of different places on my layout, and one of them is on photo corners. I think it adds just a nice little finishing touch, so I added those as well. And now I didn't have enough florals on the page, so I decided to add yet some more. These are die cuts. I used some older dies that I had in my stash, and I cut out a whole bunch of these branches to embellish the layout. There are a couple of exciting things happening at My Creative Scrapbook. They have launched a brand new website. If you would like to check it out, I'll put information in the description box. You do not have to be a subscriber this month to purchase a kit. And when you place an order, you can get a free gift this month. Just put my name in the comment box. So check out the description box of this video and you'll get some more details. So getting back to the layout, I fussy cut these really teeny tiny flowers out of that same pattern paper. I got a lot of mileage out of that pattern paper. And now I'm inking the edges of all those little flowers with some Distress Oxide in Victorian velvet. Those flowers were so tiny and I have kind of big fingers, so it was a little hard for me to manage them, but I did end up inking all of the edges. And now my plan is to just spread them outside of the clusters. Usually I put elements down and then I glue them down later, but because they were so tiny, I figured I would just put some adhesive on them and then just pick them up once and place them where I want them. And I thought that this did add a nice little detail and a nice little finishing touch to the layout. I thought that the flowers would look a little bit more complete if I added something to the centers of them, so I'm using the very smallest size of self-adhesive pearls that I have, and I'm using some scissors to help me place them in the centers. And I like the way these little tiny flowers looked in combination with the larger scale flowers. That was the very last touch I added to this layout, and here are some close-ups. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that maybe you got an idea or two or some inspiration for using your kit or for your scrapbooking layouts. Don't forget to check out the brand new My Creative Scrapbook website and check out all of their kits for this month. This layout was made with the limited edition kit, but there are 3 other kits that you might like to check out. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.